Peace and respect to you all. Welcome to Demolished Doctrine, the beginning of the end of religions, and tonight's return guest for part 4, Mr. Jamie Russell. And wrapping up our last show, we were talking about how God had declared things from the creation of the world. And also we were talking about, as we closed, the wrath of God being revealed. And since this is dedicated to Jamie, I'm just going to let Jamie take it. Jamie, it's all yours, man.
Hey, well, okay, so I think the Bible is there's like a tension with free will and the whole subject, and but I have this idea that God foresees everything and actually kind of plainly says so. In Isaiah 46, for instance, when he's challenging the sinners to basically stop having idols and prove him, and that God could prove that he is truly God because he knows what's going to happen. And I'll read this part of Isaiah 46 to get the idea.
Let me bring that up on the screen real quick, okay?
Sure.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Sorry, I'm not as quick at this as I'd like to be, but c'est la vie.
I probably.
There we go. There, how's that?
Sounds good. So I'm going to start in chapter, I guess, 8. Well, we can start there. That's cool. Let's go with 1. That's cool. Bel bows down, Nebo stoops. Their idols were on the beasts and on the cattle. Your carriages were heavily loaded, a burden to the weary beast. They stoop, they bow down together. They could not deliver the burden, but have themselves gone into captivity. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, who have been upheld by me from birth. Who have been carried from the womb? Even to your old age I am he, and even to gray hairs I will carry you. I have made, and I will bear. Even I will carry and will deliver you. It's kind of interesting that he mentions that he made everything and is carrying it. It sounds very reformed, if you will. But even I will carry you and will deliver you. To whom will you liken me and make me equal, and compare me that we should be alike? They lavish gold out of the bag and weigh silver on the scales and hire a goldsmith, and he makes it a god. They prostrate themselves, yes, they worship. They bear it on the shoulder, they carry it, and yet set it in its place, and it stands. From its place it shall not move. Though one cries out to it, yet it cannot answer. Not save him out of his trouble, nor save him out of his trouble. And then this is the part that's mainly I'm talking about. After he's saying how stupid it is to worship idols that can't do anything for you.
Right.
Remember this and show yourselves men. Recall to mind, O you transgressors. Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is no other. I am God and there's none like me. Declaring the end from the beginning, and from the ancient times, things that are not yet done. Saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Calling a bird of prey from the east, the man who executes my counsel from a far country. Someone from far away that comes from the east will execute his main thing here. If we just take it for what it says, remember the former things. Well, what's the old time stuff? There's different renderings of this in different versions, but the former things of old, that to me sounds like the oldest thing. Declaring the end from the beginning, that might be contextual there. What did God declare that was from the beginning? Okay, so it sounds to me, I think some versions even say it's the we'll use the word creation there. So in that context, I think Romans 1 might be saying more than people normally think. And I guess it's Romans 1, and then I'll want to hear what you think so far. But Romans 1:28, and it's in the same kind of context, I would say too. I wonder if Paul, I haven't read any commentaries on this, but I think you might think that this is related to Isaiah, because Paul's talking about giving them up to all sorts of sin or whatever, and then it ends with well, I'll just go with that. And but the main part is let's see, is it 28? Maybe I was wrong. Let's see, sorry. Oh, maybe it's 118. Yeah, 120. Romans 120. The wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness, because what may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. Some people say that should be rendered, it was manifest among them, like rather than being like thinking of it in a personal way, but it was like something revealed to a group or something. But that's maybe not that important. But this is the key part. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. Because although they knew God, they did not glorify him as God, nor were thankful, but became futile in their thoughts, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Professing to be wise, they became fools and changed the glory of the incorruptible God into images made like corruptible man and birds and four-footed animals and creeping things. Sounds kind of like idols, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Before God. So that makes me wonder if this is what Paul had in mind, because he mentions the beginning and the from the creation of the world. That sounds like Isaiah 46 to me, but I've never seen anybody connect it. Maybe they do. I'm not sure. What do you think? You think that's a stretch?
I don't think you've changed the topic yet.
Well, yeah. I mean, do you think Paul might have thought of Isaiah 46 and had that in mind, or just or a similar theme, or what? What would you say?
Well, since I believe this was written literally from heaven about the end of their earth, their experience, and that's when they received the Great Commission is in the upper room, and that's why it's in the upper room. They received the Great Commission. That what we're reading is they would have known all of these stories and be speaking of their own experience. They would have known all of them.
Right.
Because each and every one of them, like when Jesus says to the apostles, gather up swords, and they say we were able to gather 2 swords, and he says that's enough. Those 2 swords are the Bibles. They have 2 copies of the Bible with them.
Yeah, I think
that's what it means by sword. And in fact, this is so prevalent. We have a website today called My Sword, which is a Bible.
Yep.
But people don't seem to put those things together. So yes, they would have all known all of the Bible, all of them.
Oh, for sure. Right. Yeah. When I was in school, at a private Christian school, we used to play a game when the pastor came in called Swords, and you'd put your Bible up on your hand, up on your shoulder, and he would say a verse, and then the first person who could get to it would get to read it. And that was fun. So my idea. So normally when people read Romans 1 and they hear this stuff, they usually quote Romans 1:20 with saying God's attributes are clearly seen by the things which are made. They just kind of think, oh yeah, like creation proves God because you see created things. And I don't disagree with that, but I think it might be saying more than that. I think if we just take it as what it says, because I kind of wonder how we see God's attributes particularly. I mean, I can think of ways you could apply that in that sense, but what if it's more specific? What if the attributes that are clearly seen, that sounds like this is very specific in one sense. And so I would say the things that were made, well, when were the things made? They were made, he made things and they specifically said what were made on particular days. So yes, if I just kind of consider what that's saying. So that's kind of where the idea starts. And now in Isaiah, it was saying he's making a claim here. He's saying, test it out. You know that these other gods can't, but I'm the true God. I'm the real creator. And then he declares that he tells the end from the beginning. And he says, he's saying it hadn't come yet to pass yet. And that's, you could go into Isaiah crazy on this, but there's a part that's a really weird translation where it's saying like I spoke them and it came, and it kind of smacks of the creation where he's speaking things into existence. But yet it also says, I spoke, he says like things didn't come to pass yet. and then I said them, but you didn't know about them. You didn't realize what I was saying, basically. And but I made sure that I said it first so that you couldn't claim your idols did it. And it's
Right.
like, and I'm saying that because that's a test. If you ask me, it's not just a test against the gods, but it's a test against the true God. And so you go back to Genesis and you look at the days of creation, and you look at the things made, and you find this funny correlation that the things that he specifically happens to mention for each day correlate with the major narrative topics of the Bible per each millennium. So like you could look at it like there's this proof of God and what he was going to do ahead of time because he saw everything that was going to happen. And he's saying, and he's showing that, and it's in the book, and we know it was written before the things happened. And now we have to ask, did they really happen? And so like for instance, day 2, it talks about the grass and the Exodus. I would say the Exodus, the Red Sea crossing, where he separates the waters from the waters and dry land appears. And it also mentions how the grass springs up. And what do we see grass used as a metaphor in the Old Testament and the New Testament is it's likened to men, right? Men fade like the grass fades or whatever, or, in the lily of the valley or whatever, the lily of the valley, or Jesus parable about the wheat and the tares. That's like a type of grass, right? And there's other things.
It's definitely a type of grass, yeah.
And so, but the main one too, I would say that's obvious is that's what I was going to say next. Start at the best part is the cross, which John 1 likens Christ to the great light, which is what Genesis calls the sun, and that was some of the other verses I was going to point out, that this theme is in Scripture, where does the sun rise from? From the east, and the Malachi 4. Anyway, what do you think so far? What do you think of that idea? Do you see that?
I do see it. I think there's a lot there to discover, and I think another, if I could just make it worse a little bit.
Yeah.
Another thing that's very interesting is the discussion as to whether or not God is just proclaiming his intent. That is, my will be done. He's going to do all of his good pleasure.
Yeah.
Is he seeing the future, or is he changing it when it gets when he gets there?
That's
when the future comes.
What do you
think? I think he's affecting the present time. And when he's talking about the future, he's talking about his intent to do things.
Yeah. I like that. I like that way of putting it.
I mean, I have a hard time showing that he's not talking about his intent to do things.
Right.
But of course, this gets into the question of, sorry, I have to think of 2 words, omniscience and omnipotence. This gets into that question. So I don't have the logical conflict between omniscience and omnipotence in my epistemology, in my theology about the Bible. I don't have that problem because I don't think it's even necessary to assume that, and I don't think the Bible's claiming it. And I don't have to say, well, God knew what he was going to do. Well, I know things I'm going to do. That doesn't make me omniscient, Right.
That's true. That's kind of what Bob's been saying about with the open theism thing. But I don't think we have to go that far to be like, say God doesn't know how it's going to turn out. But maybe you align with Bob on that. It doesn't really matter. I don't really care to fight that idea. But I do think that often people who feel necessary to do that are thinking, and I don't think this about you necessarily, but it's not that it's a bad thing per se, but I think it's wrong in the sense that God can know what's going to happen and still allow us the freedom of our own decisions and have libertarian free will. I don't think those are incompatible. In fact, I'm pretty sure it's a fact that they're not. So how do you see that?
I think we're going to save that part for another show. What do you think of that? Because I think that's going to be a show in and of itself.
Yeah. So I just want to make clear that I'm not actually espousing for like a type of determinism here in the sense of negating the fact that we're free. I think that's a necessary part of the world for my theodicy and what's happening with the problem of evil and how God is not causing sin to happen in the sense that he declares that he hates it and sin.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think that's a God misleading us in that sense. I think we're free and that we're the full cause of the problem. But even you would say, probably agree with me that, there's some mystery there to some degree, no matter what view you take. But anyway, so, we could go to those some evidence of my claim. I'd say Psalm 19. Psalm 19 is pretty much shows this theme, I believe. And that is, I hope I got that right. I didn't have it written down, but I'm pretty sure it is. This is like the famous psalm, isn't it? Yeah. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the firmament shows his handiwork. Day unto day utters speech, and night unto night reveals knowledge. That's kind of reminds me of something. There's no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. Their line goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. Now, the end of the world, how do you understand that phrase? Does that have to just mean the physical geography of the world, which they didn't even know when this was written, probably? Or can it mean
they wouldn't have known that. There's no way they could have known, all of what the world was, which doesn't mean those writing the Bible wouldn't know what all the world was. I believe they did. And yeah, I think it means literally the destruction of this particular planet, the end of the world.
So like the end of it is in time, not like the ends of the earth is in geography then, per se.
Right, right. Not talking about cartography, but talking about the time span that it's
the eschaton, right?
viable and usable. Yeah.
Yeah, the apocalypse or whatever. Right. Okay. Good. Because that's kind of how I read it. Even if the writer thought it was, something else there, because it is talking about him measuring like God. It's kind of like a creation thing, I think, where it's saying like God laid down the lines like a person would, right? Or like a map maker kind of thing or something. I forget how that
he uses that kind of a mental imaging several times in the text.
Job, right?
Speaking to Job, where were you when I was laying out the measurements for the planet? Stuff like that. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's how I kind of understand. I believe that's what people will say if you look that up. And but it's funny because then it says I think it utters speech, but like there is no speech nor language. So it seems like it's saying it's speaking out to us, but it's not about. So people often, I think there's kind of a thing with the translation there that is disputed here, where it says there's no speech nor language, how that should be applied in the English, but that's not. Maybe that doesn't matter. Anyways, the next part's interesting too. It says, in them he has set a tabernacle for the sun, which is like a bridegroom coming out of his chamber. So that, obviously, what does that kind of typology lend to there?
Well, I would think you're going to say that this bridegroom reference is talking about Jesus, I would think. Yeah.
It's the sun. So we know Christ comes from the east. That's a huge theme. So I think it's just undeniable. Malachi 4, I can just mention it. It's just, it's talking about the eschaton, or the end, and it's saying the day is burning like an oven. And then it says the Son of Righteousness with healing in his wings, which has always been known as a messianic passage of the Messiah, right? Even from old times before Christ. Then they saw it that way, I believe. And so, and there's other ones we could go on. John 1 is just obvious. It calls him the great light, right? It calls him the light that lights every man that comes into the world. So I don't know.
So what do you think what do you think the text is trying to do there in using that kind of imagery?
Well, I'd like to hear what you think, how that could work, because to me the ties are undeniable. I would say perhaps you could just say I believe that the New Testament writer is fully inspired by God, but I don't necessarily think God is having to download word for word. So I'm thinking like if you went back in time and asked the New Testament writers, or John when he's writing Revelation, he is fully immersed in the scripture that's inspiring him. He doesn't necessarily like feel some sort of particular presence of God at the moment he's writing. Maybe he does. I'm not saying he didn't. I don't know. But I'm not saying it's not even necessary to, call it inspired, like as especially inspired. It's God's providence, I would say, that's enough for me, but it's not necessarily the way it has to be. I just think so. In other words, they're borrowing from this, and it's God's providence that they do so if they don't know more than that as it is. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think sometimes in the Bible we're looking at it too non-local, and sometimes we're looking at it too local. And I think this is one of those times we're looking at it too local, as if he's talking about a singular day in the turning of the earth. Okay. But quite literally in the zodiac, which, yes, it's older than the Abrahamic religions, the zodiac is, the direction of east is the direction of the balances, or the direction of the judge. And I don't think he's talking about the east as in the east as the earth turns. I think he's talking about the east as in the orbit of the earth around the sun. Where is east? That east. Okay.
Well, is there a difference?
In the sense, there's a big difference.
Is it a different direction though? I mean, or is it a different place than the sun rises?
No, it's not. It's not a difference actually, it's a very, I'm not even going to get into that. Yes, there's a difference there between where the sun rises. In fact, the sun rises in a different place every morning, except for 3 days of the year. That's a fact. There's only 3 days of the year that are the same, and they are the December the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd. Or is it 22nd, 23rd, and 24th? Anyway, 3 days in a row, right before Christmas.
When you say different, do you mean different, like, is it not the exact same place, or different as in a different cardinal direction or something? I mean, it always rises in the east though, right? To us.
It always rises generally in the east, but there's a variant there of more than 30 degrees.
Yeah. So you saw it.
It's in the east, but...
Well, yeah, it doesn't even necessarily, in my mind, have to technically be that. And I'm always open to there being layered applications of this stuff. I think we know
definitely. And definitely. Okay, so it's more than interesting to me that if I were looking at the orbit of the Earth, right, and I said the words Bethlehem, what I just said is the house of bread. That's the proper name. We have the nickname Virgo for the constellation. Okay. So if I said the house of bread, and then I said the judge, I just went from position Virgo to position Libra during a year. That would be 2 months of a year. That's what I just said there. Okay. And most people don't recognize that. And in fact, it makes perfect sense to me that the three magi following the star, the bright star in the east, would have to go through Bethlehem to get under the star in the east. And then they'd have to leave a different way. Because in the story, they're actually Venus, Earth, and Mars are the magi. Okay. And that happens every year. So that's not unusual in any way that they should come in one way and leave the other. That makes perfect sense, actually. Okay, so could I say there should be a bright a sun in its strength in the sky in the east? Can I say that? Well, yeah, actually I can. And it would be in Bethlehem and then end up perfectly east after that, because it's described in the story of David and Goliath. It's the planet Jupiter, which is why Jupiter is the planet of enlightenment in other religions, but has to be in the house of Bethlehem, the house of bread, in order to be the planet of enlightenment, which is really interesting, because David attacks Goliath with Goliath's back to Bethlehem. And he takes most of the armament of the giant into his tent in Bethlehem, which is saying the same thing again, in my opinion. But Christians wouldn't like it when I say that. Well,
I think this kind of thing is we're going to find out is every step of every person who's, maybe even in the sense of people that are lost or whatever, like the connect. I mean, the way it's going to connect, I think, is going to be profoundly. It's going to seem like determined, but yet not. I think like all these details actually have make sense and have a purpose and are telling the story on another level. Because I swear you see that more and more. You can even see it in your own life if you think about it. But I mean, but not to say that it's willy-nilly. It's not. It's precise in a lot of ways. I think, and this idea isn't. It's not like, well, there's kind of this correlation, because you could say, well, it's just a theme because they have these things on their mind or whatever. But it's more than that. I think it's because these things are like historically accurate. A lot of them, I would say. And so, if the Exodus really happened, and the critical scholars have demonstrated that this, maybe not with the Exodus, but before Christ was born, obviously the Genesis account was written, let's say. Mm-hmm. So how do you make these prophecies happen, beforehand? It's absurd. I don't see why people don't see it. But as far as the creation days go, it's like this for every single one of the days, except for I haven't really figured out day 4 and 5 yet very well. But you can see it. I mean, I don't know. What do you think I would say day 6, man is made. He's, it's the 6th day. He's told to take dominion over the earth or whatever, or however you say that. And then we see in Revelation that, it's the mark of the beast, the number of a man, 666. And then most people believe he's going to take control of the earth before Christ returns, kind of thing. Sounds like Genesis. It sounds like the 6th day. And, I don't know where you want to go from here. If you want to talk about some things that you see or whatever, but I don't want to hog the mic here.
Where were you talking about in Genesis? You want to give me some place to stop here?
Well, you can just go to a particular day. Like, let's look at the flood, I guess, would be day 2, I would say, according to the narrative. If we just take the timeline based on the genealogy straightforward, which doesn't prove anything necessarily about time, although I believe it's young Earth. But if it's not, it could still just be thematic, I think, and be related to this. But the flood is what happens on we could read the day 2 if you want, however you want to go about it. I think we all kind of know the story, but
I think this is a good place to hit. I think it's important for people to total understanding. I mean, sure. I call my channel Demolished Doctrine because what I intend to do is show people how what they've heard about the Bible is only represented in Christianity and is not represented in the Bible. I want to show them that Christians are inconsistent with the Bible. I want to show Christians that too, so they can become consistent with the Bible. And here's one of those cases. I can only personally think of off the top of my head, about 3 different places where the Bible gives a definition to the word it's using so that you can't misunderstand it. One of those is a definition for the word waters. It's in the book of Revelation, talking about the whore that sits on many waters. And it's well confirmed, this definition, throughout the text. The definition is that the waters that you have seen are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. In other words, large group of beings. I'll say it as plainly as possible. A very large group of beings is used to being expressed. The expression is being used, waters, to talk about them. Yeah. Okay. And it's well confirmed within the text, because we all know Jesus is the lawyer overall, although it's never directly said just like that. And then Jesus speaks with the voice of many waters, that Jesus is the natural leader of the people. That is, he walks on many waters. He walks on the waters. And it just goes on and on and on several times like that. So let's take the word waters, one of the few definitions given, and apply it here as meaning beings. And God said, let there be a firmament, something solid, in the midst of all the beings, and let it divide the beings from the beings. And God made the firmament, which in this case, I'm going to go ahead and spoiler alert, it's heaven. Heaven is that firmament. God, or it's the earth, it's one of the two. And God made the firmament and divided the beings which were under the firmament from the beings which were above the firmament. And it was so. This is roughly equivalent to God putting man into the garden. That's what this is. Okay.
There's something to that for sure. But consider some details there. Oh, go ahead. Yes, please continue.
So the word firmament right here, I guess you can see my cursor. The word firmament right here and right here would be two different firmaments. I think that's obvious in the structure of the sentence. The first firmament would be heaven. The second firmament would be the earth. And that makes sense because right here he says so. And he called the firmament heaven. And the evening and the morning were the first day. And God said, let the waters under the heaven, that should be capital heaven right there, as in his habitation, be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. Well, if you had water added to the land, you'd certainly have dry land in some spots, and the people would have to gather there. So I think that's all pretty self-explanatory. Actually, if we just understand the word waters means groups of beings.
I think that's right in this sense that there's something related here. I would say I wouldn't say we have to take it as rigidly like that's what it means only. I would say it intends for us to think of it as water and it's the creation. That's just my view. But I would also say like perhaps in Revelation it's giving us the definition there in that genre because it's using it that way. But I'm not going to say like a lot of people would and say that that doesn't mean you shouldn't apply that elsewhere and see what it could mean, or what it could be typing or whatever, or what it could be explaining. I would just say it's a both and kind of thing from my view. But notice that on that day, there's something missing. I think I told you, right? Do you ever notice?
Tell everyone else.
There's the refrain from each day that exists in every day except for the seventh day, which doesn't have any of the refrains. And day 7, that is. But day 2 it's conspicuous. So it has nothing. It doesn't have the quote, and God saw that it was good. It doesn't say that for day 2. Or for let's see. Yeah, that's right. For day 2. When he makes the firmament, which then it tells you is heaven. But there's an interesting conflict there on that word firmament. The flat earthers say it's the glass dome, right? And you can read Josephus said there was a canopy of ice. And I don't tend to read it that way, never have. But until because the word rakia, I read that. So the idea goes like, some will argue, okay, it's like it means a man like a blacksmith or a metalsmith that's hammering a metal out into a thin sheet. Rakia, it means it's related to this idea that a man can work metal and stretch it out like gold can stretch really thin. It's pretty amazing. I think you can spread an ounce over like a tennis court, I guess, without it breaking. I've heard that, but you could also look at it like, well, a lot of all the texts that say God spreads out the heavens, right? Like a curtain, or he spreads out the heaven, and people apply it to the Big Bang idea or whatever, which I'm fine with. But they're kind of, it's the same word, in other words. So you could say, well, it's just saying he stretched it out. And someone else says, no, it's saying it's a hard thing. You bang, bang, hit a hammer on it. I didn't really think that was feasible. But then when I saw on the book of Revelation, what do you see the people standing on? A sea of glass.
Right.
In heaven. And it's in heaven. And what's the heaven?
Right.
It's the firmament. So it's like I'm thinking, maybe it's both things. Or
could I suggest a way that it can mean both a solid thing that spreads out?
Yeah, please.
God describes the throne room of heaven being 29 separate objects.
Where do you get that number?
It's exactly 29. 24 plus 4 plus 1 is 29.
Oh, okay. The 4 being
the 4 beasts around God's throne.
Oh, yeah.
No.
Okay.
The 24 elders, the 4 beasts around God's throne, the one who sits on God's throne, 29 separate objects.
Oh, okay. Oh, I see.
Well, 29 separate objects can be both solid and spread out and not break ever.
Yeah, it is like, what do you think? Is that related to what Ezekiel sees, you think?
Ezekiel's another topic. I have a lot to say about Ezekiel. But
Yeah.
and I was talking to Rob Rowe about this the other day. He did
I
not
think I was
agree with
there.
me.
I was there.
Or I think maybe actually he didn't even get the point of what I was trying to say. He kept referring to how broad spread these ideas are through different societies. I don't care. It's not even my point.
Right.
What I was trying to say is, did I get lost there? What I was
So
trying to say is, gosh, what did you just say?
you were talking about Ezekiel, but we were talking about the
Ezekiel.
29.
Okay, so Ezekiel is a very peculiar book within the Bible. It doesn't agree with the rest of the Bible. The one calling himself God calls Ezekiel by the wrong name, a special name for Christ, Son of Man, talking to a singular individual, not a group, not sons of men, not a son of man, but Son of Man. He calls him Christ 30 times. The phrase only appears 50 times in all of the Bible. 30 of them are in Ezekiel. The angels in Ezekiel don't comfort Ezekiel when he faints. They just move really fast like lightning. He can't figure out how they're moving. He says that they have shoes and breastplates and wings and wheels within a wheel. And when the wings are two set of wings covering their lower body, their legs, two set of wings up in the air behind them, and the wings are touching. Well, two wings touching don't flap. I'd like to point that out. And then he says that the difference between everything he mentioned before, which is, I'm going to say it again, the shoes, the breastplates, the wings, and the wheel within a wheel. And then he says something really significant that no one pays attention to at all that I've ever heard. He says, as to the living animal. Okay? That means the part that's alive. So what he just said is all the other stuff that I just described is not alive. But some of them move. So if I said there was a non-living thing that moved, that's by definition what?
A machine.
Some kind of machine. He doesn't know what to call it, but he's describing machines. Okay? And then he describes the living angels, the living animals. Okay? And that's very different. And then the one calling himself God takes Ezekiel into heaven where he shows him abominations, disgusting things. The rest of the Bible says there will be no abominations in heaven. He spends 30 hours, that's an estimate, I don't really know, about 30 hours of FaceTime with this God. What the rest of the Bible has said, no man has seen the face of God. He tells the prophet to hurt himself by laying on the ground, and that would make your body rot, by the way. You can't just lay on the ground. To eat food cooked over human dung. And then the prophet Ezekiel says, wait a minute, I've never done anything nasty my whole life. He says, well, I'll cook it over cow dung. It'll be fine.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
He can change his mind, apparently. He wasn't sure of what he wanted to say. He changed his mind after Ezekiel only makes one objection. Then he tells Ezekiel to cut all the hair off his head. You'll never find that anywhere else in the Bible. Part it into 3 parts. You won't find that in the Bible. To cut 1/3 of it with a knife, to burn 1/3 of it, and cast the last third to the wind. That sounds like a magic spell or some kind of incantation. Won't find that anywhere else in the Bible.
Reminds me of Revelation, though, with the.
What's that?
It reminds me of Wormwood, kind of the theme about Wormwood with the, or the idea of like the thirds, of the angels, or like the third of the.
Oh, it definitely sounds Bible-y. No doubt about it. The whole thing sounds Bible-y, but it's describing like spell casting and stuff.
I would say it could be. I mean, I want to hear more about this. We can talk about it now if you want. I think I take a hybrid view there on that. I would say not too long ago, I essentially listened, and this is one of the reasons I found what I think is this pattern in the creation story, but I listened to some of the really people that know they're really smart and go to have degrees in theology and look down on us or whatever, but I listened to them, and some of the stuff they're saying makes sense. And so I kind of accepted this. I've come to accept this idea that there is these polemical uses in the Bible. Maybe I'm sure you believe that too, but I didn't really see that before. In fact, I kind of fought it, I would say, because it seemed to me that if they're using polemics from the surrounding ancient Near East culture, then This was
Then what?
detrimental. What do you think? Well, at the time, I thought it was detrimental. Is that why do I think it's detrimental?
Yeah.
Well, I was scared that it would make, it would be like evidence that it was just made up from, copying the culture.
Wait. Don't be such an atheist there.
I know,
Don't
right?
be such an atheist. Look, either these, I think these are the options as I see them. Either our Father is extremely prejudiced and only likes Jews, right? And he adopted some other folks in, maybe the Islams, definitely the Christians. We definitely got adopted in. But generally, he only likes the Abrahamic people. And God created the rest of the earth just to throw people in hell. That's a possibility. But I have to say that your God is poor at planning, poor at execution, and highly prejudiced.
Yeah.
Or there's another possibility. The reason that you can have comparative religious studies is because God told everyone the truth. And maybe that story got twisted over time. Maybe it didn't. But it would have been told to a people the way that they needed it told. Just like you don't tell a 5-year-old the mechanics of reproduction when they ask where babies come from. And even more than that, you can't tell the same story the same way to all peoples around the earth because of different value systems and social structures. For instance, in America, we eat the cow and we think it's fine to eat the cow. But in India, cow means a completely different thing. It's not a sandwich.
Yeah.
Cow doesn't mean sandwich. It doesn't mean dinner time in India. In America, it does. So if you could say cow in both of those situations, but it means two very, very different things, which means you shouldn't use the word cow there. You should use something else.
Right. Well,
Okay.
if they're making it a god, though, does God intend for that? You think?
Does God intend for what?
For say somebody who's a Hindu that they worship a cow.
Do they worship a cow? I don't know that Hindus worship cows.
Well, do they not? I'm sorry.
think,
maybe I'm really stupid. Sorry.
No. I think the idea of reincarnation and the existence of cattle, and they consider cattle to be a fairly high animal, is that they're reincarnations of their ancestors.
Right.
That's why they honor the cow. You could say worship. That's not totally unfair. So they're ancestor worshipers to some extent. And you're kind of right, actually. I'm just not sure that that's a weird way for them to think about angels and God. That's not necessarily a weird way for them to process that.
That is interesting because you put it that way. You could be like charitable and say it's not right, but it's not blasphemy in the sense that they only have so much light, let's say, or something. Or maybe even you could go further than that, right? You could say that's their way of doing it. But of course, I was going somewhere other than your charitable interpretation. I was going to say, like, because it seems like God's saying, like, don't worship what you think is your ancestor or consider it sacred in this, like God or angels in the same sense, because for the same reason God might condemn doing necromancy and getting answers from the other side, because he wants you to depend on him, is what I would think. But this is kind of an interesting point.
Let's consider that for just a minute. If I pray to God and I perceive God as something within me that gives me information and encouragement and love and all these things, and if that happens to me, but I perceive it from inside of myself, is there something intrinsically wrong? Just talking about the experience. If I called that my higher self, is there something wrong with me referring to God that way, experientially, not factually? I think
that's possible. I'm unsure, but I think I see what your point is, and I think that's reasonable to be possible and not be. It just depends on how it works, you know what I mean, or what it does, how it can work is ultimately would be the answer in my mind. Like, if God was willing to do it that way, then yes, and also, like you said, experientially it could be in that sense. Then yes, I think that's possible. I'm just hesitant because God does seem to prescribe things a certain way and not like it other ways.
Who?
To the Israelites.
Okay, so your God is very prejudiced against other racial groups that he made.
No, no. So I
Okay.
think I would say this about that, because I think that's a valid question. So, okay, but because I agree with you that God's the God of the whole earth, right? That's clear.
Yeah, that's
in,
clear.
in different stories that God, the Israelites or the Hebrews or the people of God, let's say, at any given point, there's different stories where God seems to be teaching them that their prejudice is wrong. In other words, that these people are not totally as lost to God as they had thought. Right. Like,
Well, I think that the hero of the story corrects during end times, and that correction is for the mass of the planet, almost everybody.
right.
But they'll be given the correction. So if they believe something that's not accurate or just completely dead damn wrong, that's probably okay.
Right. Yeah, maybe. I think the Bible says that God is righteous judge, whatever we can discern of what that would look like, and then people are judged according to the light that they have. So there's something to that too. So
It definitely says that, yeah.
so I think God is going to surprise people with how loving and able to save He is. Let's put it that way.
I think he's going to do a fantastic job, and
Yeah.
some people are going to be really pissed. And there's a story about how pissed. No, there's a story in the Bible about how pissed they're going to be.
Yeah. Which story is that?
The story of the vineyard keeper who goes to town to get workers for the harvest.
Oh yeah, yeah. Or how about, doesn't he tell that he invited these people and they didn't come, and then he sends them out to the highways or whatever the byway.
No, that's the wedding ceremony. That's another. No, you're right. Those two are attached. Those ideas are definitely intertwined. But what I'm saying is, okay, so it comes to be harvest time for the vineyard keeper. Vineyard keeper means God, y'all. That's what vineyard keeper in the story means. Just like the vine and the grapes and the leaves and all that is talking about Christ, and then you got the apostles, then you got the people. That's what it's talking about. Okay, it's not talking about making grapes and wine. That's not the point. So the vineyard keeper, it's time for the harvest and or end times, right? And of course, the vineyard keeper is in charge of the end times. Duh. So he goes out and he recruits people to come and bring in the crop. That would be Christ and the apostles and the 144,000 who follow the Lamb wherever he should go, right? But he goes out first thing in the morning, right? So the first one's established. And those workers come and they start working. And they understand the truth of it. They're really worshiping the right God, okay? But there's not enough workers to bring in the crop. So he goes out at lunchtime and he goes downtown, finds some more workers, brings them in, agrees to pay them the same wage. But that's not enough workers. So he goes out at dinner time and collects some and promises to pay them the same wage. So at the end of the day, all the work's done, the harvest is in, and he pays them all, but he pays them all the same. And the ones that worked all day were like, hey, wait a minute. I've been at this, like, I've been a Christian my whole life. Don't I get something more than the guy who's been Christian half his life? And what about the guy over there who's been a Christian for 5 minutes? Well, God says the reward's the same, and it's his money. So he can do whatever he wants. That's the way it goes, guys. So yeah, I think that parable is about how lifelong Christians are going to be kind of ticked off that, like, so many people who are not lifelong Christians are going to heaven.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they're still paid. Lucky for them, right? Yeah, I think. That's a good story.
The payment is resurrection into heaven, or re-entering into our natural home, and that is the same reward for anyone. Although there's many mansions, there's lots of space apparently in the heaven of the Christ for us to all enjoy. That's great, but there's apparently not different heavens, which I'm okay with that too. Whatever they decide is perfect, I'm just going to agree that's probably going to be perfect. I would ask of Brady D real quickly. I'm sorry, could you write more sentences in a row? Because I've looked at some of the things you've written. I appreciate you dropping by. I appreciate you making comments, but but I think I'm having trouble what you're getting at. So could you like write a whole paragraph using like all 200 spaces so I can try to glean what you're saying? I don't want to straw man you. I don't want to react when I don't understand. Okay. So if you'd use all your spaces, I'd appreciate that, Brady D. Thanks for showing up. Don't know how you found me, but thanks for finding me.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily saying that I think people aren't saved through Christ. I'm not even saying that I know people who have some other religion. I'm not suggesting that I know that they're saved in some way. I don't know, and we're just discussing different possibilities. And I don't know necessarily what Richard thinks.
Well, like I said at the beginning of the show, I can't be certain that people who are Christians are saved. I can't be certain of that. And actually, they can claim what they want, but they can't be certain either until they've accepted heaven and ascended into heaven. Then they'll be assured. Can they drop out of being saved after that? There's been one situation where one person took a third of their crew with them. That was Lucifer, kind of a special case. Don't know why he thought that would be okay, but he was the only one that ever left,
Right.
But again, like he made it into the Bible. He made such a big goof up. Like that's a big goof up. You made it into the story. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's do you take that as well, I don't want to jump all over the place, but do you want to go over Genesis, the day 2 thing that I was going to say? There's a couple of verses that I think kind of help support the idea. The fact that there's and God saw that it was good seems to indicate something special about that day. I would suggest, I don't think it got accidentally left out, but he says, but we're talking about God's creation here. Surely it was good, right? The creation was very good. I actually believe that. I think the reason it's left out is for those are like the little details that you don't catch until the 500th reading. And so, very few people ever tell me, oh yeah, I noticed that, and it's kind of interesting that if my idea is true about this correlation with these events in history, then that would mean something was not good about day 2. Well, that would be the millennium. The flood comes if you take the ages literally and the genealogies literally. Straightforward, dad has them at this age, he has the next at the next age. It gives you the ages. It's pretty hard to mess that up. And then I would say the way it's described is the waters above were separated, like you were saying. We just take it straightforward from the waters below, and then that makes the space that is heaven. You might say that's one way to look at it. There's other ways you can kind of parse that, but like you were saying, and I think that's possible. But it's interesting that the flood is described as the waters of the great deep being bursting forth or coming up, you would presume, right? Because it's flooding the earth. And then it says the windows of heaven were opened. So essentially the waters above are coming in. So it's essentially undoing what God separated. They're being released to come back together. And there's probably something there with what you were talking about with the idea of this God separates, right? And then we also see that, there's this idea of the fallen, the Nephilim thing. Maybe that's them playing on this idea, the flood of the angels coming back down from heaven into the
That's exactly what I was about to say. You said it for me.
Yeah, and that's in Jewish literature. People say that's what the Bible's teaching. I'm torn. I see it both ways. It could mean both. Maybe it's probably both and, like everything is. So another thing here, there's this dispute in scholarship that's interesting. It comes up on the popular, say like a John Ankerbird show when there's those kind of debates comes up. But it's Psalm 104, and people argue: is this talking about? Is this a creation narrative, or is this a theme, or is it the flood theme? I would say Psalm 104. I think 104.
Okay, you want me to bring that up, or do you have that? Or
we can. I don't have it. I mean, I can go to it, but I can just tell you generally. I mean, if you want to pull it up, we can, and you can fact check me or whatever. But essentially, essentially, the argument is he talks about him laying a stopping point for the waters against the mountains, kind of thing. And I would say it is talking about creation. I think
O proud waters, thou shalt come to the shore and no further. That one.
Yeah. But if you go on, you see that it actually uses a similar structure as the flood narrative in Genesis 6. And there's other hints that it's, so there seems to be hints of both, in other words. I mean, we could read it out and point out the different things. If you're just honest and open to it, you're not usually the young earthers are defending that it's just talking about the flood and God stopping the waters to go so far for the flood and that he wouldn't flood the earth again. That's where you kind of see the structure of the flood. But there's also things that are clearly tied to creation language. But the old earthers will say it's just about creation, right? It's just talking about when God, and Hugh Ross uses it to show how the science matches with this being about creation, okay? And they don't want it to be about the flood. I think it's
the
both.
Problem that I have with that is I think our Father is actually brilliant in like almost ways that we can't understand. He's too smart. Sure. And as I read the Bible, it seems to me that these basic ideas are in it, but it's kind of dumbed down and oversimplified so that we can get something out of it. And without being insulting, I think he did it in a very gentle way. Is this what you're talking about? Psalm 104:9, thou hast set a bound that they may not pass over, that they turn not again to cover the earth. Yeah, it's a one-way trip, bro. I think that's true.
Yeah, so the young earthers will argue that that's talking about kind of relating to the idea that God won't flood it again and it sounds like when he covered the mountains sort of thing, but it doesn't actually say it covered the mountains, so that's kind of wrong. And then the old earthers point out that can't be the flood because it specifically says this. I think there's other reasons too, like structure too, where you see it's following the flood narrative. So I don't think you can deny either, honestly. I think they both make good points.
I think the flood, the way that I'm reading it, is more important than the historical value of such a flood, other than God is powerful. To make the statement God is powerful, okay, God can do what he wants. Hey, great, that's awesome. If you can make this planet, like flooding it is not actually a big deal. Okay.
Right.
That's not even showing off at that point. Yeah. I don't even know why to bother.
I think if you look that up, that psalm, they call it a creation psalm.
Yeah.
So because it's borrowing the language of some of the creation too. That's why they call it that. But yeah, I think if it's David there, I think it is. The point is like what you're describing about God and what he can do and what his power is and who he is. Right. So I'm just drawing I could have been more prepared to explain it. I think there is undeniable ties to both. And in other words, I think they both make good points. And my point would just be that, well, I'm not surprised that creation, it's about creation and the flood, because I think day 2 is describing that part of the narrative of the flood, because it correlates with this idea that God is telling the general big narrative points in the Bible, the story of history, that he was doing he was showing that he could say it before it happened, and that he declared the end from the beginning. And so I'm saying this week of creation types out all the things in the Bible narrative and real history, and then I think there's no coincidence that the day of the Lord is the 7th millennium, the 1,000-year period. And so that's kind of how it correlates. And then you can also see in how this culmination in making man and his wife, and then the woman eats the fruit and falls, but then the man takes it on with her and eats it also. And then, that's kind of like this bride narrative, this bridegroom thing. And so Christ is the second Adam, restoring what was lost. In other words, that's kind of what I'm thinking about that. And
let me back up just a little bit there. I've been listening to you talk about the word waters and different applications of it and things. And, I've yet to find someone point out to me, or yet to find in the text myself, where the phrase waters meaning people doesn't work. And you brought to mind another example in that psalm that we read a moment ago, or that part of a psalm that we read a moment ago. In the Bible, it reads, "O proud waters, thou shalt come to the shore and no further." And I find that interesting, because lakes and oceans don't crawl out of their basin. That can't be what he means.
Yeah.
But it would make sense to say that as people on the earth, and how far we'll get into space. It would make sense that way. And I think that what he's talking about there is that we're only going to get so far before he just shuts us down and keeps us from becoming part of a larger society off of this earth, which could be very, very dangerous and something that I think we're about to jump into that we're not actually ready for.
Yeah, I'm actually open to the idea that there's other possible beings equivalent or greater than we are that could live on other planets and be compatible with the Bible. I think I would suspect, and it's probably because of my tradition or whatever, but that it makes sense to me, in other words, that could be the case, but that they would be kind of like quarantined from us. I wouldn't have, because a lot of times when people talk about the biblical religions and how it would be a problem, right? Because then wouldn't God have to like come down as a man in each planet to redeem them? And I'm thinking, well, why would he have to redeem them if they never fell? That's what I think. But maybe a lot of people think that was like inevitable in a certain sense. I don't tend to look at it that way. I think it's probably a good way to look at it, but I don't necessarily, I mean, this would be maybe somewhere we disagree, but I'm open to either way. Honestly, it doesn't have to be either way in my mind, but
I think it depends on. I think it depends on what is on that planet. If it's children, if it's an Earth that God made, then there would be children of God on it. And I think that human nature is human nature, and I think Satan's nature is Satan's nature, and the nature of God is the nature of God, and these things will never change. So they would need their own saving from the lies of Satan, just like we have.
Okay.
So I think God would have to. Yes, I believe that our Father creates a new God, his Son, who creates a new God, his Son, and et cetera, et cetera. And I think these are worlds without end. Amen. I think they really, really are. But we're over an hour now, and I want to keep these morsels in bite-sized chunks,
sure,
so people don't get too overwhelmed. Although I would love to talk about this topic for, the next continuous 300 hours if I could, but I can't.
Sounds good.
So let's have some wrap up thoughts and put a bow on this thing. What do you think? Go ahead, man.
I think I basically already did. I think God's just trying to. We have within here something that we can see plainly, amongst other things, that God is in control and loves us. And that if you look into his word enough, you will see he wants you to have faith, not a blind faith, but faith to seek it. And then I think there's treasure to be found. And I think there's a lot more that could be found on this idea that would be faith building. And I hope we can continue to do that. Be fun. It's
Amen.
fun.
And I'll wrap up by addressing Mr. Brady or Mr. or Mrs. Brady D. I can't tell. But anyway, I'll wrap up by saying the following. I understand that Jesus is the truth, the way, and the light. I really do understand that. And I do believe that at what most would call the second coming comes Jesus correcting people. But just because someone was, I don't know, someone was into some cult or maybe voodoo or whatever, it doesn't mean that they couldn't meet Christ and change their mind. If he's persuasive enough, I think there's a pretty good chance of him being a pretty persuasive dude. So I think they're going to be okay. All I'm saying is I think that Christ and God will be more successful than a lot of Christian sects would like to think they would be. That's basically all I'm saying. Okay? Amen. Anything to add, sir?
I would just say, yeah, I think Jesus is the only way to God, as we understand, as we've been told from Scripture, and I affirm that idea. It just gets complicated, if from the traditional teaching. So yeah, I don't really have a problem with whatever his issue is. I understand it, I think, though.
Yeah, I think I understand his objection to what I could have been saying. I just don't think it's exactly what I was saying.
Yeah, better way to put it.
Jamie, thank you so much for coming for another show. I hope we can do this again next Tuesday, maybe a little bit earlier if you like. We can go earlier than this. This seems a little bit late.
You bet.
Yeah, we could
I'd
go
love to.
earlier than this. We could probably go as early as like 4:30 Mountain Time, which is
Okay.
5:30 California. I'm sorry, 3:30, 5:30. Shoot, let me get it right. 4:30 Mountain, or which is 3:30 California, which is 7:30 New York or 6:30 New York.
I'm Washington, so same as California.
You're California. Okay, you're Washington time. Okay, so as early as you want to go is fine for me. I don't want to interrupt your dinner. I don't want to interrupt your family time. I don't want to interrupt those things. So whatever time you choose is good for you is good for me. Okay, whatever time that is.
I'm moving, so it's all messier. So 4:30 sounds fine. Your time, 4:30? Okay.
4:30 my time would be just gorgeous. Thank you so much. All right, well, I'll schedule a stream and I'll link you. And thank you everyone for showing up, especially Brady D, who is new here. I appreciate you dropping by. I hope we've said some things that you think were interesting. I hope you'll critique what I'm saying, and I hope to see you more in the future. Peace and respect to you all. Thanks for dropping by, including Big Zebra and Peebo Thulu. And I think that's everyone that came by. Synagogue. That's right. The synagogue came by. Appreciate you coming by, CJ. So peace and respect to you all, and good night. And I want you all to know that I truly do look forward to the day that we're all great friends.